So what I'd really like to do, I mean, we've talked about sort of, describing innovation at Cushman and the organisation more broadly, but what I'd really like to talk about is this word culture. And we've talked in other edits, people will be able to see that you've talked about culture is about the glue that binds an organisation together. So I'd really like to have a look at this creation of an innovation-based culture amongst the 50,000 plus staff at Cushman. How have you, or you may not have done it yet, how are you going about bringing that into the organisation?
Yeah. Well, again, I think you've got to be quite humble here as a head of innovation of your ability to actually affect major cultural change in an organisation like ours. But I think the way we're nudging, and I think that's the way that you've got to look at this, is important to what we're doing. Is one of the pillars of what we're doing is around people in innovation, and it starts with empowering people. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So in every of our service lines, we're going through a visioning exercise to various stages complete in some of them, about where that service line needs to be in the future. And certainly that discussion is catalysed by people like me offering perspectives on external change. But it's not my view on the future. The service line leadership across our European region need to have that. They need to own that vision. And unless they own it, I don't think it'll be affected. So enfranchising people at that kind of who have agency at that kind of level is super important. At a lower level of the organisation, there's a couple of things we're doing. The first is we've set up a citizen development programme globally that allows people to invest their time in creating quick fix solutions, and we train those people. We invest in the training in order to give them the tool sets to effect small scale innovation, and that helps to get pilots off the ground in a way that is less bureaucratic or doesn't need a lot of money behind it or a lot of people ticking a form to say it's okay. It just gives people an opportunity to do that. Yeah. But another thing we're doing, so again, we're a big organisation. I keep saying that, which is a huge advantage to us, right? I mean, it means we can invest in the platform, it means we can service clients globally, we can deliver a full suite of services. But it also, for a role like head of innovation, means there's more complexity in the design to manage. And there's huge opportunities in just sharing best practice across groups. So I've set up a number of best practice groups across the organisation that team up to kind of share that knowledge and be able to kind of one-up each other. I think, look, also you mentioned our Future of Cities lab. Thanks for the plug. This is a campaign I'm really personally passionate about that we started a few weeks ago, actually a couple of weeks ago, which explores how cities might change to a horizon of 2040. And I think this is quite a difficult topic, right? Because no one really knows what the future involves in 2040. It'd be quite difficult. It's quite difficult to project that far. Yeah. And in order to make some educated reasoning why things are going to be like that way in the future, you've got to risk being wrong. And I think in many big organizations, there's not a cultural acceptance of being wrong. And in one of the ambitions of that project, what we're trying to do is to try and frame a series of parameters about the future and a logical discussion about them, but I acknowledge some of the failings and some reasons where they might go wrong and push the boundaries. We've also been hugely innovative, I would like to say, in terms of the design and way that website and portal works. We've set it up as essentially a virtual environment, and it's just a very different way to consume content than the real estate services industry is used to use.
I just frame that a little bit, because I think it's really interesting the way that you've almost provided a narrative there to feed into the explanation of what the lab is. So is it there to say, we're probably going to be wrong? And I picked this up for those of you who are not a subscriber to Richard's Future Cut email newsletter, read it, because in the latest one, I think it's your 200th edition, you basically said, I'm going to make some predictions and they're going to be wrong. Is that because you see part of your role to help staff realise that it is okay to be wrong, but you have to be forward-thinking, you have to look and make predictions? And is that part of what the lab is there to do, which is to provide that framework of acceptability about not always getting it right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a vehicle to give effect to that principle. I think, look, if you look back at the property services industry, how it's operated historically, it's tended to be quite conservative, quite traditional, quite straight, seen as a professional advisor, someone who's going to execute and kind of follow steps to get to the end of a process. I did a lot of work with our clients over the last sort of 3 years and asked them, because being focused on what your clients want is quite important to innovation, right? So I asked them what they're looking for from an advisor like us, and they were very consistent in their answers. And one of the things that was perhaps not expected by some of my colleagues in this was the importance of creativity in the role that we have. And in order to be creative, you've got to be willing to put your neck on the block and willing to be wrong. Now, I think you can't. That doesn't mean you have a free pass to using guesswork in how you construct answers about the future. I think you've got to be very logical about your approach. But equally, I think when you're looking out to a horizon of what might change by 2040, you've got to acknowledge the probabilities and take a more stochastic approach to projection. And my firm advocacy to my colleagues within our business is be willing to be wrong, but challenge what we've got today in a way that might give our clients ideas and perspectives that they didn't have previously. And some of those might be useful to them, and some of them might not be, and they can discard them. But I think not taking chances, not taking risks it's the biggest enemy of any business, candidly. And I think you've got to be willing to break new ground, and that is a very common factor to innovation, obviously.
I agree. And I was looking away from the camera for a minute onto my computer, actually, because while we were talking, what I just wanted to do was show two things in some of the research that I put together before this interview with Richard, because I think they're really important when we're talking about culture, and a lot of it, and to use your terms again, Richard, is to express values and make sure people are okay with them. I'm just going to flip here, because one of the things I really liked about your tech team, I suppose, was being very clear about the global tech strategy that was there. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, and we'd be in some of the other edits, is talking about there's a global technology team, there's a global transformation team. But I think understanding values is really important, and pick up these 4 points here about tech strategy. So optimize our day-to-day operations through a robust technology infrastructure. I really like that when you mentioned about, you've developed that development program for small-scale innovations, because ultimately innovation is not about radical thinking a lot of the time. I mean, about 70% of our time should be spent on improving incremental innovation, with only sort of 20 and 10% actually spread around thinking about and actioning radical. So, this is a really important point, I think. Innovate in everything that we do. That is a perfect mentality to, really bring in innovation everywhere throughout an organization. Become trusted advisors. Obviously, you've already mentioned about that. Is you're listening to all of the people that you want to try and help, and ultimately, this whole point about invest in strategic collaborations, and that's why what I've seen with Cushman in terms of working with Stanford or 1871 organization, or the plug and play stuff, Metaplot, Fifth Wall, is all going to be important. But to go back, you mentioned about Future Labs. I was having a play around with it earlier on. If you want to have a look at Futures, Cushman, Wakefield.co.uk, stuff like this is really going to be particularly interesting for some of you guys. And I couldn't, in the speed of things, Richard, jump into the interactive immersive, which I was playing with yesterday. I just couldn't find it, but go and play. There's some pretty cool stuff in it.